All right, welcome to Playing It Safe. And we are back today, and I was able to convince Austin to join me. You gonna say
Oh,
hello?
hey, what's going on?
And I just thought it was a good conversation to start off because we were actually hanging out with one of your siblings the other day, and we started talking about self-made. And is someone really self-made? And the people that claim they're self-made, what does that mean? So, as far as talking about self-made, what comes to your mind when we even mention the topic self-made?
well, what people typically think of is like somebody who had no resources at their disposal rather, was able to create some success for themselves. But in thinking about this, it made me even question the idea of self-made at all. Is that even really a thing? We all are standing on the shoulders of those who came before us, standing on the shoulders of giants. So I mean, is it even a real concept? I mean, there are some people if you literally came from zero, like you were, an orphan, you're, a homeless person who suddenly you figure out a way to create a business for yourself or rise yourself up out of that. That's completely and utterly self-made. I mean, you might have had some help along the way. Someone might have taken some pity on you, but in very few cases can someone truly be solely self-made. I feel like.
Well, I think I have a little bit of a different opinion in the fact where I think it's more of a you breaking the cycle of your the product of your environment. Because yeah, we come from we are the product of our environments, but to me, more of self-made is someone who didn't necessarily have a generational wealth to get to where they wanted to be at. And it self-made to me is also somebody who got to do something that was um, not an option for them and probably never could have been, kind of like
Not a typical way.
not a typical thing. Yeah. And when I talk about generational wealth, that is, assets passed down from one generation to the next. And I actually didn't really learn about this probably until after we were married, what that meant. What do you think of generational wealth?
I mean, like the definition, like
Yeah.
just, somewhat. Well, I mean, wealth can depending on how you define wealth, but you know, someone who's wealthy has enough money where they don't need to worry about money. So that's wealth, and and they can pass that wealth down onto further generations. Um, like for instance, I was listening to something talking about Jeff Bezos recently, and a lot of people say he's this self-made man. I mean, he grew this company from nothing to being billions of dollars. And then there was a point in the company's inception where it was about to they were about to go bankrupt. At least according to this thing I listened to, I actually didn't fact check that. I wish I had actually, but where he had gotten a loan of like hundreds of thousands of dollars from family, and I was like, oh, okay. I mean, yes, he still turned that into billions of dollars, but who has that behind them though? Like very few people have something like that to back them up, or when what hits the fan, have someone that can actually give them or loan them that money to be able to pull themselves out of a hole.
You can curse in this podcast, Austin. And no, I I agree with like the generational wealth is something I didn't realize that what it was until after we were married and we started having these kind of conversations. And a lot of it was because of education and my that opened my eyes. Meaning like, for me, I came from a single parent household, and my mom just made enough to not be poverty level,
Mm.
but nowhere near enough to pay for an education. And so because of that um unreasonable, unrealistic borderline where she met at, we didn't really qualify for financial aid to go to school.
Mm.
So I accumulated a lot of debt, as you know, because you married me and you were kind of questioning, like, should I marry her? Because, that was a lot of money. Talking about like a mortgage worth of money.
Yeah,
And although I have,
six-figure debt.
yeah, six figure debt for sure. Although I have done really well, in my career wise. Um, and although I make really good income, I still find myself being a product of that debt and not being allowed to, this is where you start learning about like debt ratio income. And you can't, even though you make six figures yourself, you can't really purchase a home worth that much because of, oh, you owe so much for school. And it's just countless things. So now that we're parents, I'm trying to figure out how can we accumulate, how can we create some kind of wealth to pass on to our kids so they don't have to end up in the same circumstances that you know
And that, of course, is the goal. Like, even, when we're talking about this, we're not necessarily bashing people who were able to, or who were with the benefit of generational
yeah,
wealth,
definitely not.
because that's the goal of all of us. We're trying to accumulate that so that to provide a better lives for our families and those who come after us and stuff like that. So, yeah, no way is it trashing that as an idea. But yeah, that is the goal. But with all that, like you said, with all that debt, how can we even begin to do that?
And the reason why we came up with this topic was because whether it's someone reaching out to us or people who are very well known, like famous of, I believe the example we had was like Paris Hilton. She claimed she was self-made. And it's like, no, I mean, we're not, and again, what Austin's saying is we're not bashing anyone for being as successful as they've gotten, but
The claim of self-made is an
yes,
exaggeration.
because you couldn't, most of us folks that don't come from wealth couldn't imagine, just didn't have the money like Jeff Bezos you mentioned, or no one has the handout to let us borrow, or even the banks won't really let you borrow um, a business loan of that magnitude just because you have an idea. And if you failed, and you come from wealth like the Hiltons or Kardashians or any of these other, individuals, if they didn't have that wealth behind, if a project didn't pan out and they lost that money, it's just maybe a little shot to their ego, but
Yeah,
that's about it.
for an awkward Thanksgiving.
Yeah, but that's about it, But for us, I mean, geez, I grew up where my mom didn't have much, so even if I could hit her up for some money, it probably would only be like, well, I can only let you borrow like $40, and I need that money back, And and if you didn't pay that money back, they're gonna let you know you didn't pay it back. So that's what we talk about, like self-made, and what it. Again, we're not bashing anyone who's done really well, but um, I almost take a little bit of offense to individuals who you know don't realize, and a lot of it comes with privilege, because a lot of individuals don't realize the benefits that they reaped from their family, which is not a bad thing because that's what we're trying to create for our own children. Um, but you can't really claim. You can say you've done really well, but you can't really claim that self-made component, because it really takes away from those who have really worked their asses off to and started from nothing to become something. And there's quite a few well-known folks. I know recently we were watching the Kevin Hart documentary on Netflix. Not that we're sponsoring it, but it was just interesting to hear a perspective of a childhood that could have easily not had those, not come out the way we would have never known who he was. It was never an option. And I really like the hustle and effort that is shown in this documentary, because a lot of times um we don't see behind the scenes, and we don't see people like getting up at 4 a.m. and going to bed at 1 a.m. It's like they get like 2 or 3 hours of sleep because that drive is there, and they always know this might be temporary. And so we gotta they gotta try to build as much of it as possible now, to continue to hold on to that success. Because, for example, like Kevin Hart, not his mother trying to struggle to put food on the table, like we have experienced ourselves. Is like you don't want to go back to being poor. You just, there's always that fear. So how do I continue to hustle? And I think that's I kind of myself, right? Like I use myself as an example. Is although I technically have a career job, I am always waiting for the rug to be pulled, from me. And so, like, what can I do to always have a backup plan and a plan after that and a plan after that, just in case, you know, things don't go well.
Hmm. And it just reminded me, kind of, or gave me an idea about even in that documentary with Kevin Hart. It brought to mind, even though he didn't have any kind of financial benefit that his mother was able to provide for him. I mean, she was able to put food on the table, give him a roof over his head. But what she was really able to give him that helps him now is that work ethic. That work, like he said in the documentary, she was always hustling. She was always working. There was like she was always trying to find an angle how to make it and keep the food on the table. And like even you and I, we are the product of the effort that our parents or our mothers put into us. Um, your mom, single mom, working really hard to, again, put food on the table, roof over your head, and you were able to see that. My mom, again, single mother, working really hard, and she was the benefactor of her mother, who was able to get her and a bunch of other family members here from Haiti. She worked. She came here by herself. She worked her tail off. She was able to pay to bring a bunch of family members over. So those are the benefits that we have gotten. But we couldn't claim necessarily self-made, or I wouldn't want to say like, oh, I did it all on my own and it was only me. Like, no, it's like that feels like you're diminishing the efforts of all the people that came before you. I think that's what I take issue with the term self-made with is I don't like I was saying in the beginning. I don't really feel like that's a valid term. Can any of us really say that we are self-made? And of course, there's just different definition of what self-made is. But yeah. But if we're talking about generational wealth, yeah, maybe not so
Well,
much
and
so.
I think of self-made as you not necessarily having the resources, but also you're also doing something that you had not necessarily the full support to do, because you've done something that others couldn't see possible. And you still had to go through it without, one, the resources, two, people saying that's a great idea, because they're like, no, that's not a good idea, don't do that, you're just going to waste your time. And so people can't usually see the vision in that. So I kind of think of that as self-made with those components with that.
It's funny when you said that. It reminded me of something you were telling me. A family member of yours had said. They were you were having a conversation about like somebody's business venture and like, oh, isn't that risky? Shouldn't you should discourage a person from doing that? And you were like, no, that's what I encourage people to do is to take the risk to follow their dreams. I'm not going to discourage them from that, but it's a different mentality, generational mentality of like,
Yeah.
you mentioned before that it was always hammered into your head, just get a decent job, 401k benefits, whatever. Not like, it was never follow your dream. It was just work for the government and get get benefits and stuff like that.
It's kind of funny you mentioned that, because a lot of people say they listen to this podcast and then they come talk to me to try to encourage someone to talk them out of their dreams all the time. Like if I'm gonna be the guru and be like, don't do what you love, go go do the opposite and play it safe. And I'm like, you
You weren't
you
paying attention.
you obviously didn't listen to anything I said. That's a lie. And also, of what this whole thing I'm doing this stands for is, um, those who are, I'm trying to show people who are not part of the example that they would normally see um, in different positions. And that's why the self-made came up, because a lot of people are coming up to me and be like, oh, you should, look at this, or well, look what I've done. And I'm like, well, it's a lot different situation, because you were you benefited from those resources that who I'm trying to talk to. The majority of individuals I'm talking to don't have that benefit. They don't have those resources. They don't have that generational wealth. They And most of the times they don't even have that family support, as far as the encouragement, because we really look for validation in those closest to us. And a lot of times, even though it's out of good intention, those closest to us don't give us that, validation that we are seeking from only them. So it really can send us down a bad, downward spiral without that encouragement. So that's what I mean about, like, some of you saying you listen to my podcast, and I was like, you're not paying attention. But you know what? It's okay. I'll forgive you all. But I really, yeah. So it just comes with the whole self-made, and um, I just really wanted to touch about that because I just wanted to make it clear that it's not, again, like Austin mentioned earlier, it's not to bash anyone's success. I think people who are very successful, like, even if you did have a boost in help, and you still made it and you've been successful from it, I'm like, cool, that's awesome. I really admire that work ethic. But it's, to me, it's not the same level of someone I would admire that maybe makes less but had to do it from nothing. And so I don't want to take away those individuals who maybe are not at the level of that everybody knows them. But I take more, I admire individuals at a greater level who maybe have done well for themselves and done something that wasn't typical without the resources, even if the whole world doesn't know their name. And so that's what I just want to make it clear, because I think a lot of times we look at somebody famous and we're like, I'm not successful unless I get to that level. And it's like, no, that's where we got to, like you mentioned, we got to define our own success or define our own things. And that's why I just wanted to talk about that, because I think that when others claim they're self-made and we start listening to that information about it, then we start thinking that what we're doing is not very, it's very minimal, and it's not anything to really be proud of or encourage. And so I want to make sure those individuals who are working their asses off and still struggling because they're trying to get to a level of knowing that they are the truth definitions of those who are being self-made, just know that I admire that, and it takes a lot to do that. And don't let these other individuals who are claiming that being self-made is way more when they had additional resources that you didn't have. So just don't devalue yourselves in that fact. I guess that's what I wanted to really focus on, because I'm always trying to make sure that the individuals who are struggling, like, just know that you're doing well. We got you, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And just as a weird side note to go right back to what we talked about before, props to all the single moms out there raising kids and trying to make better life for them. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it definitely helps out, because you all you want to do is, as a parent, mother or father, whichever, all you want is the best for your kids. And so, I know, back to the single mama, my mom was always saying, like, I may have not done well. It's like, you know what, you left a great impact on me. So just know that it was awesome. So thank you for listening in to Playing It Safe. Please like and subscribe and share the story. We can't wait to talk to you again next time, and we'll see you soon.
And don't forget to leave a comment, because it's really good for the algorithm, apparently.
Austin does all my technical stuff, so thank you, babe.
No problem.
All right, have a good one, y'all.
We got a kid awake. We got to go.
Bye.